Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to Reading Aristotle's Politics. Today we're continuing Book 7 of the Best Regime of Aristotle's Politics, looking at Chapter 10. So let's turn right towards it. Now, he just talked about the parts of the city and discussion of this, and who should be who should be a citizen, who should not be active in politics, and therefore the citizens in the previous chapter. Now, today we're going to be continuing this. He says that the city should be divided among separate types of persons, and that the fighting and the farming element should be different. Seems to be something familiar to those philosophizing about the regime, not only at present or in recent times. So there's the idea that but this contradicts. Okay, in Book 6, the farming element is said to be the best multitude. Okay, um, so therefore, this, in other words, what is being said here is completely contradiction in Book 6. But what about here? In fact, much of what is being said here about farming cannot be done by those they lack virtue. But okay, that we're going to have one, the virtue must be at leisure, and therefore it cannot be farmers, cannot be artisans, it cannot be laboring. Okay, this is therefore they must be different, right? And that therefore, and that this is philosophers who said this, right? Things stand of this manner in Egypt still today, and also in Crete, Syrosis, and having legislated in this fashion for Egypt, as it is asserted, Minos for Crete, right? In other words, this is 47. This deals with, um, again, this is Herodotus from Herodotus, book 2, right? Therefore, that Styrasis legislated this fashion for the Ethiopian Egyptians and Minos for the Crete. In other words, the arrangement of common messes also seem to be ancient, those of Crete having a rising connotation with the king Hippomenos, while they are much older than these, right? But the chroniclers who live there assert that certain Ilus became king of Orintria, and on account of him, they changed their name and were called Italians instead of Oritrians. And the name of Italy also acquired by the preonomy of Europe, which is within the Gulf of Sicilium and Lentimus, these being a half day's journey apart, right? This is 48. He says modern day Gulfs of Syrian Gulf. The material referred to here may derive from the chronicler of Entius of Syracuse, right? So again, this is some information from Antinos from this idea of Italy, right? The chroniclers who lived at that time, of how Italy emerged, right? He says, now they say that this Attalus made farmers of the nomadic Ortrians and enacted laws for them, in particular instituting for the first time common messes. Okay, hence even now, some of those who are descendant from him still use common messes in some of their laws. So therefore, but notice that common messes are here talking about the farmers. Notice this, it says, but this is interesting that hence they would that okay, there's going to be separation of those who are citizens and those who have common messes, and those who are farming, laboring, and things. But notice this, that he says that that has made farmers of the nomadic Arturians and acted laws for them, in particular instituting for the first time common messes. Okay. Hence, even now, some of those who are descended from him still use common messes. In the direction of Terhina live the Opicans, who were then, as were present, called the surname Usonians, and in the direction of Agapia and the Ionian Gulf, and the so-called Styrus lived the Cronians, and the Cronians too being Ontranians by stock. So again, 49, 79. The Trans correspond roughly with modern Tuscany, Agraria, modern Puglia, the southeastern extremity of the Italian peninsula, right? So these are like geographic locations in Italy, this Tuscany and Bulgaria, right? And it was there then that the arrangement of common messes first arose, while the separation of the political multitude, according to the type originated in Egypt, for the kingship of Staurosus long precedes that of Minos. Okay, so therefore Minos is said to make the division of this, and that should be the citizens should have the dinners, and it's the slave the farming is done by the serfs, right? Um, One should therefore consider that practically everything have been discovered on many occasions, or rather an infinity of occasions in the course of time. So there was everything has been done. Every he's saying here that there's nothing new under the sun. Every type of arrangement, every type of things. If you look carefully back in history and look at by some peoples, these things were done, and all the varieties are there, right? For it is likely that that the necessary discoveries were taught by need. So the necessary discoveries are taught by need, while those relating to elegance and superfluity may be reasonably expected to begin increasing once these are already present, the necessary things, right? So therefore, once you have elegance and simplicity, maybe reasonably have that you have more and everything. And one should suppose that the things connected with regime stand in this manner. In other words, okay, the regimes are simply done from need and a superficity, and that therefore these all the options and all the arrangements that we know have happened or will have happened already, and they exist. And this is very interesting. He says here, but notice that he's asserting that therefore the discussion of common messes, right? Again, to the Spartan, the Cretan example, he talks about this idea that we need to separate the Egyptians and the Cretans, right? Separated things. They separated the citizens from those who farm, those who do the agrarian. That these things are not to be the same people, okay? And that these are to be subjects and ruled over, and these are the rulers are the citizens. Um, and now the idea is that the rulers are going to have common messes, but this idea of this origin of common messes does not begin with Minos. It says it begins with this Italian king. But the Italian king that who did this, he did it for the farmers, that farmers who participated. So, but here the farmers are not to be the ones who share in the common messes. The laws were done for them. So therefore, this is something interesting here. There's a that this is going to be, and therefore the differences here, he's saying, these different arrangements. He goes, it is there then the arrangements of common messes first arose, and the separation of political multitude according to type originated in Egypt, even for the Staurosus, the kingship of Staurosus long precedes that of Minos, right? Staurosus is prior, the Egyptian one is prior to that, but Minos comes from the Italian. But the Italian example of Onos is interesting because it seems to what? Um, um, Dealt with farmers doing it. This is not to deal with. So therefore, he says that one should therefore consider practically everything has been discovered, right? He says again, this is now he continues. I repeat this again, right? Everything has been discovered on many occasions, or rather, an infinity of occasions in the course of time. For it is likely that the necessary discoveries have been taught by need, while those relating to elegance and superfluity may be reasonably expected to be increasing once these are already present. Superfluity, things of this, and one should suppose that the same thing regarding to the with regime should stand. That all such things are ancient is indicated by those connected with Egypt. For the Egyptians held to be most ancient to people, yet they have obtained laws and a political arrangement, right? Hence, one should use what has been adequately discovered while attempting to seek out what has been passed over. Now, 50 is the apparent reading Heramentos with Lambus and Drenzer instead of Irimontos, what have been mentioned. Okay, so I think again we can go back here and what has been mentioned, right? That have been discovered, and what has been passed over. Many ladies consider this passage to be an interpolations whole passage to be added more. This whole passage here about this to be added into the text. So that's the whole question, right? Um, so what is it? But this has been kind of a discussion about the messes, right, and the division of laborers or something. And we should follow the Egyptian example that he makes the authority of Egyptians that we have this division. Okay, but what about this? But the Egyptians are not necessarily a political people, right? Um, so wait a minute, because that the territory should also belong to those who possess heavy arms and those who share in the regime. So the land and the territory should be owned by those who possess heavy arms. And then, as was said earlier, and why the farmer should be different from these, and how much and what sort the territory ought to be also discussed. So why should there be distinct from this? Again, in Book 6 of the Politics, book 3, chapter 4, about the farming multitude, and earlier elsewhere, he suggests that no, it shouldn't. The farmers should be the armed element. Okay? They should be the soldiers. It's best they should be the soldiers, and particularly the heavy infantry, or the heavy infantry. He said that he also indicated such when he talked about the armed element in other chapters. Now here, his argument is that they should not be. Again, they should be the armed help, and the reason for this is that farmers don't have the necessary leisure in order to be virtuous or be political. And we're going to create the presupposition of this best regime. The presupposition of the best regime is that it's going to be a regime of virtue. It's going to be the regime by citizens who are those who are. It's going to be the happy regime, and therefore the citizens must be derived by the principle of living according to virtue, right? And therefore you must have a citizenry, those who are ruling, those who are exercising citizenship, those who are in charge of the deliberative offices, and should be those who can proceed a life of virtue. Um, and that if the city is going to regime, that class must also be the armed class, right? And that we have to exclude farmers and artisans and that because and laborers because the Benesoy, because they don't have leisure. They lack leisure. Their ways of life and they're as he said earlier, they're not virtuous, right? So that we have to do this to the land, this idea that land. So farmers must be different. This must be discussed. We must now speak first of the distribution of land. Now we're going to do this, right? So we should discuss this question. Why should that not be that? That's a question. He's not going to do this. Instead, we must now speak first about the distribution of land. And with regard to farmers, who and of what sort they should ought to be. Since we assert both that property should not be common, so that it should be private property, right? As some had said against Plato, right? But rather should be common in use after a fashion of friends, and that none of the citizens should be in want of sustenance. So therefore, no citizens in here should be. Again, this is a criticism of Plato's Republic, right? So therefore, this idea of the citizens regarding common messes all hold that it's useful for them to be present and well instituted cities. The reason for our holding the same opinion would be spoken of later. Now, again, there is no discussion of what he does this. I think this is kind of maybe back to Republic. It points us to the question of this. He doesn't give such a discussion later. There's no discussion of common messes. Only points where common messes are really discussed that we just discussed it there in that paragraph, where its origins, and then we go back to the discussion of common messes all the way back in Book 2, right? All citizens should share in these, okay? But it is not easy for the poor to contribute the required amount from private funds and administer the rest of their households. So again, this is a criticism of the Spartan versus the Carthaginian, right? The different ways of this. Further, expenditures relating to the gods should be common to the city, the entire city. Again, so this idea that the citizens are going to own the property. If their property going to be, their property is this, that the property is not going to be common, but it's going to be common for use. So that aspects of it, they're going to give things for use. the city's the use, the things that are produced will be for the city's use, and therefore they would do this, right? They have to contribute from their private funds and administer the rest of the household. So therefore, there might have to be some common funds for this, right? It is necessary to divide the territory into two parts, one being common and the other for the private individuals, and divide each of these into two again. So therefore, the property, the territory, is divided in two parts. One part is for the common use, and then the other is private. And the private, divide these in two. One part of the territory should be for public service in relation to the gods, and the other for the expenses of common messes. So therefore, the common territory, one is for the gods, and of the territory that belongs to private individuals, one part should be towards the frontiers and the other towards the city, so that the two allotments align with each for each individual, all partake in both locations. Now, what is he saying? The two divisions. The territory is divided in four. There's parts of the territory is for the common, and the rest of the half is that. And then these are divided again too. Of the common areas for the gods, and then for the common messes. And the second one is the two territories are going to be what? That is towards the outsides, the frontiers of the city, and those interior, those in the interior. Why? Because why? Why you need to do this? The second one is so that towards the frontiers, and the other towards the city, so that the two allotments assigned each individual all partakes in both locations. This provides equality and justice, as well as greater concord with the view to wars with their neighbors. In other words, wherever things do not stand in this matter, some make light of the enemy towards their borders, while others are concerned with it overly and contrary to what is beautiful, noble, fine, kalos, right? What is noble. Again, this idea is that if you don't have citizens having both, then either the citizen is going to be towards the frontier or to the interior. The interior one is not fearing the borders. The one who's in the borders are going to always fear it. Okay, and therefore this leads to disputes and division in the city. Hence, among some people, there is a law that those who are neighbors or bordering people may not share jointly in deliberation concerning wars against them. Right. The assumption being that they're not capable of deliberating beautifully on account of their private interests, right? So therefore, this is the danger. So to avoid that is to have both, right? He's going to insist that everyone has both. One's an exterior and this one. A citizen is going to have territory in two locations. It is. Remember, who does the work though? It's not the owner. It's going to be his servants and slaves. And the city itself is going to have slaves running those things, and it's going to be administered, right? It is necessary. The common lands are going to have the servants and slaves running that, and there's going to be servants and slaves running the private lands as well. The farmers and those people dealing with that, the servants and this, are going to be are not going to be free people, not going to be citizens. They're going to be subjects, serfs, or slaves. And as such, they're going to be excluded from not participating in the city. And they're not citizens. They don't engage in deliberation. They're not citizens in a sense. Now he warns that the danger of not making sure that all people have equal both. Then there'll be people who do this, who are going to be living. If they're only going to be people who have only one slot of land, the interior will not worry about strangers, and the other one will be excessively about strangers, right? And the argument is that deliberating against war against the neighbors, they're not. Some people have the people in the bordering areas don't get to. They're removed from doing discussions of war because why? They're not capable of deliberating beautifully on account of their private interests. So therefore, this idea you can't be a judge, and therefore this idea that there's a law restraining on that, we think that you're not gonna really decide what's for the good of the city. You're going to your interest is so powerful. You're going to be determining this. This is a check on that, right? The argument is, and hence his mechanism of owning both, well, is to kind of present that, right? Everyone has an interest in it. Everyone has an interest in the border in that sense, but that is a different. It is necessary to divide territory in this manner, then, for the reasons just spoken of. As for the farmers, It is necessary above all, one should speak according to what one would pray for. So we should speak to what is prayed for, that they are that they be slaves, or are neither of all the same stock, or spirited ones, right? Again, the helots, right? And in such a way that they would be useful with a view to work and safe in regards to undertaking a subversive activities. Or secondly, they should be barbarian subjects, resembling in the nature to those just mentioned. Okay, like that, so it must be their nature must be that they must be good to work, but not able to engage in subversive activity. Again, remember what he said about that in that situation in book two, where he's criticized. This is criticized. That this is ideas. He's making us. And there's something on. These are conventional slaves in that sense. These are not really slaves by nature. This is the slave by nature is not because of the different people and different barbarians. This is a misreading of the book one, chapter 4 and 5. This idea of the slave by nature is not the slave by. This is a conventional slave. The idea here that we do this of those of those, the ones in private hands should be the property of those possessing the estates, while those in common land should be common. So that and what manner of slave should be treated, and why it's better to hold out freedom as a reward for all slaves, we shall speak of later. In other words, of 94, there's no discussion of this. And I think that's because he can't have a discussion. If we discuss that in book 4, in other words, he's going to say we're going to give freedom out to them. But if you're going to give, you should not be. If a slave is by nature slave, he's a slave by nature. Giving him freedom would be the most unjust thing. It's not going to be a reward. He's incapable. He only while the slave book one, where in chapter 4 and 5 and 6, where he dealt with slaves in book 4, chapter 4, about the slave by nature. The slave by nature is only human, or participates in his full nature human only by being the slave. That in other words, he's lacking the deliberative element that he needs. That you're going to now force a slave by nature to be now free. That's not necessary reward. How is that a reward? It's only a reward if that is a conventional slave. That he's a slave because what? He's a barbarian. His nature is like this. In other words, he's not seen as he's a different stock. He's not going to be seen as part of us. He's and therefore he's an alien or something like this. But that means is that leads problems, right? That leads to problems. That's why he warns against this. Um, he doesn't give a discussion of here. He just says that they're going to be rewarded, right? We're going to reward the slaves with freedom, so that this is and remember the two types of slaves. There's going to be the slaves who are common, the slaves who manage the common properties. These will be common to all, and then there'll be but then the slaves who run the private your things are your slaves. They're your property. Okay, here's the problem: property of all, property of this. This will lead to the problem of who's managing them, how they're being managed. Won't there be the problem of the commons that he talks about in the Republic, in the criticisms of these things? Um, this is a problem. This is a problem. And what is said here about this should be what is, again, what Aristotle criticizes about this in the Spartans and the Grecians should also be taken account of here in that sense. In other words, isn't the criticisms of Spartans and Crete in book 2 very much to come here? And also the criticism of isn't there two cities here of Plato with the farmers, they're not having the farmer citizens, the Republic, that there is basically the city is not a whole but two cities, and one city occupying the other. So again, this is a very important problem. In other words, the criticisms of book 2 are very much at play here, and we should think about this. And the problem of justice is this city just? The answer is no, because it's conventional slave. It rests on the best city here. This way of life, this way that rests on perpetuating an injustice. Oh, I mean, I know Peter Simpson and others are going to say to me, well, but this is because they're no, they're natural slaves, natural slaves. No, this is I think this is a fundamental misreading I think Aristotle's discussion of natural slave, he's not going to say, he says, yes, difference, people difference, they're going to do this. That barbarians, we of course, is naturally fit to do this. This is not because that the barbarians are slaves by nature, but from the Greek point of view, that they're lacking, if they're lacking a thumos, or they're they're not so. In other words, that they are can be ruled, and and not ruling them would be dangerous to the city. So therefore, there is this idea that may be okay. It's dangerous to have them in the city in that sense. They're not going to be fit. They're not going to fit in the city. They're not going to be equals. They're not going to be this, and that therefore, okay, we have to. The question is, what's worse, enslaving them or pushing them out, killing them? In other words, this is the problem, that sometimes this is that politics is always a suboptimal choice, right? Politics is not always the choice of what is best, but a lot of times it's about the what we can't get what is best because the conditions out there. That the condition has got, you have these people here who are radically different, who don't share the same characteristics and habits as you have, and you cannot share a life with them in that sense. There's going to be animosity, that therefore you have to restrain them. This is not an optimal condition. This is suboptimal in that sense. So again, this is what the danger here is, that how can this best regime that we would pray for produces now, all the way in book 4, his solution to this natural slaves would be technology, the idea that the weave, the thing that weaves itself, the shittle that, so you could have us, if you had robots, if you had AI and robots, and devices that could move themselves and wouldn't need, in other words, the laborers and the farmers and the laborers are all machines. We're not people. You avoid slavery, and this is the point that Aristotle in Book 1 talked about that the only way to avoid slaves is that if weaves weave themselves. If there was something that could, a tripod that could, self-moving devices, that the tools could move themselves and didn't need a person behind them, right? Um, well, but this is not a choice that the Greeks actively sought after. The modern world, we do create technology. Um, there's implications here. Now, the argument here is that the technology will destroy us, destroy our humanity in that sense, and and also do what? Make think of the debate about self-driving cars. What happens? What happens to people who don't have the high skill sets, high mental things, mental capacities? Not everyone is going to be capable of being thinkers and deliberatives and citizens in this highest sense. In other words, there's a whole scope of people who simply just will not have the necessary mental capacity of foresight and judgment, or subordinated. What to do with these people? Remove them? Don't, what to do with them? They're going to be superfluous. They can't. In other words, they're no longer useful because the machines can do their work. Again, this is the fundamental problem of the discussion of natural slavery here. So therefore, this is another problem. This slavery seems to be not natural in that sense. There is an unjust character of it, and therefore there is something weird about the best regime that one we would pray for relies upon something that is clearly enslaving of people to be the farmers and the serfs, right? So let's stop here. This is where we stop. This is like there. So that any questions or comments, please put them in below, and if when I see them, I respond to them. I'll comment any questions or issues about this chapter. Please put them there, and I'll get to you when I see them. Um, if you like what you saw here and like this chapter, please like it, share it with friends. If you've not subscribed, do subscribe. Encourage others to subscribe to grow the channel. If you didn't like it, you can say no, but say why in the comments, and I will, maybe I learned something from you. Okay, something here. If you can follow me on social media, and the links below. If you want to help me out doing these things and keeping this channel up to date, because after I finish the politics, I would like to start Montesquieu. It's going to be tough in that sense. Please You can do this by becoming a Patreon or Subscribe Star member. I know that no one has really done it. I think one person did it once, and who did it. Um, okay, that's where you can help. I should have done this years ago. I'm bad about that. Okay. Another way you can help, you can buy my books, but my other two books, my Aristotle book, you can buy this book. This book, if you buy this one, my other books are commentaries. This is not a commentary. This is a notebook for Aristotle's politics workbook. This is kind of like a Cliff's Notes on the politics, where you go through the politics, how to understand the text, how to master it, and how to look at book by book, chapter by chapter. It goes with summaries, outlines of the points and things, charts, graphs, and other tools that will help you guide and understand, get a grasp of the text. And this is not only for beginners; is also for maybe even people with more serious scholars, people who are trying to do this, spend it with. In other words, it is a tool navigate the politics text. On that note, we will say you buy by Lulu. These are available at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and most of the online book distributors. If you buy by Lulu, however, I would get the money the books to the distributor gets for profit. Okay, but the problem is, I understand Lulu doesn't always the shipping cost of Lulu may be, other places might give you free shipping. Lulu might charge you, therefore you might pick the free thing. But if you want to help me, you buy it by Lulu because I'll get a bigger share of the I'll get the share that the bookstores get. Um, so please, that's one way you can help. On that, we're now turned to the end of things. Next time we meet, we look at chapter 11. Um, Again, thank you for being with us today. I hope you have a good day. Take care. All's well. Bye. Goodbye, and see you again soon. Take care. Bye bye.